All right, so this is a midterm day 3 review, so last day of review. And we're basically just finishing up the problems. Remember, we're going up to number 24. So we got, 8 problems to go. Now, some of these are very simple. So 16 to the 3/4, you're just going to basically type that into your calculator, okay? So I'm just going to go to the calculator, type in 16 to the power of 3/4, right? So 3/4, hit enter. It gives me 8, and I'm done. Okay, whoops. So again, these are supposed to be gimme problems. Like, you're not supposed to have any problem doing these, okay? But I mean, the only way you can kind of get these wrong is if you punch in the wrong numbers, right? But I literally just typed in 1, 6, and then x to the box, meaning power, right? So a power of. Then I hit this button that basically shows a fraction, right? And then once I hit the fraction, I press 3. Then I press down, right? The down arrow key, and then 4, and then equals. So that's basically it. Like, that's all I did. And from there, I was able to get my answer of 8. So, I mean, being familiar with the calculator helps. Okay, but I think most of you guys are fine with that. So anyway, this is 8. Same thing's going to happen with number 18, right? I'm just going to push 8 to the power of a fraction, 5, and then down 3, hit enter. So let me do that right now. So 8 to the power of a fraction of 5/3, and my answer comes out to 32, and I'm done. Okay, so it's the same thing, same button combinations as above, just different, well, same types of button combinations, just different numbers for 8, 5, and 3 instead of 16, 4, and 3, 3 and 4, sorry. So very basic, pretty easy, okay? Now this one I mentioned before, this one can be done mostly with a calculator. It's just a little bit you can. But there's a property that basically tells you if you have a product of things, okay, so I'll write it right here, a product of things raised to a power, okay, then you can give that power to each item, okay? In other words, I can rewrite 8x to the 6 to the negative 1/3 as 8 to the negative 1/3 x to the 6th to the negative 1/3. Okay, let me write that a different way here, the way it looks like in the front. So I can just write that out. That's my first step. And then the 8 to the negative 1/3, I'm just going to put that on my calculator. So 8 to the power of a fraction, it's going to be a negative 1/3. It should give me a fractional answer. It tells me half. So I'm going to write half. And then x to the 6 to the negative 1/3. Remember, that's supposed to be x to the 6 times negative 1/3. You multiply, right? So here's another property that you guys are supposed to know. When you have a power raised to another power, it becomes a product. So the power of 6 raised to the power of negative 1/3 means multiply 6 times negative 1/3. Well, that equals to negative 2. 6 times negative 1/3 is negative 2. So your answer will be half x to the negative 2. Now, this could be the answer that you see on your, let me move this thing a little bit, but on your test, okay, you might see that, okay, or you might see it written like this. Because remember, a negative power means you should bring it down, right? You should bring it into the denominator. And if the negative power is in the denominator, you bring it up to the numerator. But in our case, it's always going to bring it down. So you can see one of these two different types of answers, okay? It just depends on which one they want to give to you guys. That property, which again, it's an algebra 1 property, basically says that x to the negative n is the same as 1 over x to the m. Okay, that's another property that you guys are supposed to know from Algebra 1. So I'll kind of just put those here. That way you can kind of write them out on your notes. Okay, so either one of those answers is correct. I just don't know which one's going to come out on your test. Okay, so it's better to be prepared for both. All right. So we've gotten to the point where we're going to get to the tougher problems. Now we are going to do the hardest problem first of today. Okay, number 20. And then after that, the rest of them are supposed to be easier. Okay. Now this one's not as difficult as it can get. Okay. The ones that are the hardest ones usually have like an n plus 6 or an n minus 3 on the right side, something like a binomial. But we don't have that here. So that's good. It's not going to be as difficult as they can make it. But it is still going to be the hardest of Friday's test. Is going to be like number 20. Okay. So in order to do these problems, remember, you're supposed to have your radical by itself. It is by itself. It says radical 12 minus n. So it's there just by itself. Okay. Once it's by itself, you're supposed to square to get rid of it. Okay. So I'm going to square both sides. Okay. That gives me 12 minus n is equal to n squared. And then I told you guys, if when you do this, you see one of your variables being squared, that means you're probably going to have to factor. If you have to factor, that means you got to set it equal to 0. Okay? So I'm going to move everything over to the side where the n squared is. That way it makes it a little bit easier. So that's going to leave me with 0 here. This will be n squared plus n minus 12. Now it's my job to figure out how to factor this. Okay, so let me go ahead and do that. A is 1, B is 1, C is negative 12. So my X method is negative 12 on top, 1 on the bottom. Okay, and I'm going to multiply what times what to get a negative 12 and a positive 1? 4 and a 3. Which one is positive? 4. Okay, so 4 negative. Oh, that's right. I did hear someone say negative 3. I'm sorry. At first, I thought I heard 4 and 3, but then it hit me. I'm like, no, they said negative 3. So yeah, 4 and negative 3. Dividing both by 1, which doesn't matter. These are my factors, right? N plus 4, n minus 3. So let me go ahead and put that over here. 0 equals n plus 4. N minus 3. Well, once it's factored and set equal to 0, you're supposed to basically write both of those factors and set them equal to 0. So n plus 4 equals 0. N minus 3 equals to 0. So what are my two answers then? All right, so n is going to be negative 4 and a positive 3. Now remember, guys, when you get two solutions, you have to check your work. Okay, if you only get one solution, you don't have to check the work. But if you get two solutions, you got to check. Okay, so that's what I'm going to do right now. I'm going to check my work. So I'm going to put right here in blue, check step. What happens if n is negative 4? Okay, if n is negative 4, my original problem is going to look like this. The square root of 12 minus negative 4 equals to negative 4. That's the square root of 16 equals to negative 4. 4 equals to negative 4. That's not true. So that's not an answer. All right, what about if n is 3? Well, if n is 3, I get square root of 12 minus 3 is equal to 3. That's the square root of 9. So 3 is equal to, 3 equals to 3. That checks out. So my only answer is n equals to 3. Okay? This is going to be my only solution. Okay, so originally I had two answers, negative 4 and 3, and then I checked them and only 3 works. Remember, you only have to check when you get two solutions. You don't have to check when you get one. Okay? Any questions on this one? And this is going to be the hardest type of question you're going to see on Friday. this type right here. The other ones that have radicals, they're not as hard. We're good? All right, so look at number 21. Notice how the radical is all by itself already, right? So I'm just going to square both sides. Okay, so the square root of b minus 5 equals to 10. I'm going to square both sides. So on the left side, I just have b minus 5. And on the right side, I have 100. Okay, so if I just add 5, I get b equals to 105, and I'm done. See what I mean? These are easier. Okay, when they're equal to letters, that's tougher. When they're equal to numbers, that's easier. Now you might say, okay, well, number 22, it's equal to another square root. Like that's got to be more difficult. Not really. Maybe there's a little bit more work, but it's not difficult at all. Okay. For number 22, we got a square root of 2x minus 6 equal to the square root of 5x minus 15. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to square both sides like I normally would. And in doing so, it's going to get rid of my square roots. Okay, so if I square both sides, I get 2x minus 6 equals 5x minus 15. And then from here, this is just an algebra problem, guys. This is solving an equation with variables on both sides. It's like a 6th grade, 7th grade standard, right? So this is not supposed to be like, oh my gosh, now it's difficult, right? We're going to move this 2x over here by subtracting it. So I get negative 6 equals to 3x minus 15. We'll add the negative 15 over to the right side. So that's going to give me a 9 equal to 3x. And then if I divide both sides by 3, I get that x is equal to 3. Single answer, no need to check. Okay, 2 answers, check it. 1 answer, don't worry about it. Here we got 2 more examples. One of them is another radical problem. The last one is a conjugate problem. Remember the conjugate problems, we talked about them yesterday. Conjugate problems you can just do on your calculator, okay? You don't have to worry about having to work them out by hand. But please make sure when you type it out on your calculator, it looks the same. Okay, don't just type it in without looking, hit enter and see what happens. Okay, it better look the same or else you're not going to type it in right. All right, so for number 23, we have a negative 8 times the square root of x minus 5 equal to a negative 16. Okay, so this time the radical is not by itself. So I'm going to have to fix it first. I got to get rid of that negative 8 that's multiplying into it. Okay, so to do that, I'm going to divide both sides by negative 8. I know a lot of people, and I look at the homework, a lot of people are adding 8 on both sides. And I understand why, because they see a minus 8, so they figure, how do you get rid of a minus 8? You add 8, right? Which is true. But the thing is, they're not identifying what the negative 8 is doing. They just say negative 8 means minus 8. So I'm going to plus 8, right? If we use those words, right? I'm going to add 8. So they're not noticing that negative 8 is actually multiplying the radical. Now, if it's multiplying it, you have to divide, right? You got to do the opposite of what it's doing. So I do understand some people will put plus 8 on both sides. I get it, but you're just not noticing. You're not paying close attention to what that negative 8 is doing. So please, when you see numbers, ask yourself, is it multiplying? Is it adding, subtracting? What is that number doing? Okay. Well, once we get that out of the way, we're going to do a square root of x minus 5 is equal to 2. Okay. Now we'll square both sides since the radical is all by itself. So square here, square here. So I get x minus 5 is equal to 4. I'm just going to add 5 and I'm done. So x is equal to 9. I mean, if you want to check it, go ahead. I mean, you get this 9. Just do it in your head. Mentally plug it in. 9 minus 5 is 4. The square root of 4 is 2. 2 times negative 8 is negative 16. It works, right? But that's what I'm telling you. When it's 1, you don't have to check it. It's going to work. It's when it's 2. Maybe both work. Maybe none work. Maybe 1 works. Okay? So here's the last problem. Again, This is purely calculator. You type it in right, you should be fine. Okay. So I would hit like the number 4. Actually, no. I would hit the fraction button first and then a 4 on top. On the bottom, I'd put -2 plus radical 5. I'd hit enter. It's going to give me the answer. Okay. But again, I'm here to show you how to do it by hand, just in case next year you guys are taking a math class. You might be saying, I'm a senior. Well, it doesn't matter. You still got to take math in college for the most part. Okay. The only seniors that don't have to take math in college are seniors who have taken trig pre-cal and gotten an A the first semester. Okay. Or if you're in calculus, you may not have to take it. Okay. So if you're in math 3 as a senior, there's a good chance you're going to have to take at least a college algebra course, at least. Unless, and I know this from experience because of my daughters, unless on the entry-level math exam, because you're going to have to take a math test and an English test, and if you want to try to get like credits for Spanish, anybody here doing like Spanish 1 and 2 and 3? Anybody doing, so a couple of you guys, anybody here doing the AP Spanish? So if you've done the AP Spanish and passed, you might actually be able to get foreign language credits, so you don't have to worry about doing those. If you haven't taken the AP test, then you can by taking Spanish itself, like Spanish 1, 2, and 3, you could take the foreign language entry level exam in college. You'll take it, and based on how you score, you could maybe get 1 year of credit, 2 years. So like my daughter took Spanish 2, but she only did good enough to get 1 year of foreign language credit. So she still has to take another one. Okay. But that's it. Whereas my other daughter, she passed both. So she didn't have to take any. Okay. And then the other daughter, the one that didn't get any credit, she did well in her math entry. So she didn't have to take a math class. My other daughter did have to take one. Okay. So it just depends on how well you do on those tests. Before you can get into college, they test you, right, to see where are you. They don't just throw you straight into calculus or anything like that, right? So yeah, there are some entry level stuff. Anyway, I'm kind of off on a tangent here. The way you do this, again, is with a calculator, but with number 24, if you're going to do it by hand, we're going to use conjugates. Okay, now why am I revisiting conjugates? Well, because I had someone ask me, what happens if there is a negative in the front? Do I change them both? And I remember telling you guys, you do not change the number in the front. You only change the number in the middle. So notice how -2 plus radical 5 stood -2. It just changed from a plus to a minus in the middle. Okay. And then from there, it's just what we normally do, distribute and simplify. So we're going to distribute this 4 here into both of these. So that gives me a -8 minus 4 square root of 5 over, and then on the bottom, -2 times -2 and -2 times negative radical 5 gives me a 4 plus 2 radical 5. And then radical 5 times -2 and radical 5 times negative radical 5 is going to give me a -2 radical 5 and a negative radical 25. How do I know if I did this right? Yeah, the middles cancel. Right here they go. These do cancel. Now I made sure, don't just blindly cancel them out and be like, it's supposed to cancel. Like, no, make sure they do, because if they don't, then that means you did the multiplication wrong. So here we go. On top is -8 minus 4 radical 5 over, this is 4 minus square root of 25 is 5. So that's -8 minus 4 radical 5 over -1. Don't leave it like this. The -1 divides both of these numbers by a negative. That means this is going to become positive. The -8 will become positive. The -4 will become positive. So your final answer will be a +8 plus 4 radical 5. Or if you just put it into your calculator, it'll do it for you. Again, practice these things. Okay, practice punching them into calculators. That way you don't make mistakes on things you shouldn't mess up. Like this should be a gimme, and you're looking at that, you're like, that's not a gimme, that's a lot of work. None of that work has to happen if you have a calculator. Okay, so this is a gimme. There's a lot of gimme problems on Friday's test. There's a lot of them. But then there are some hard ones, right? The radical stuff. Those might be a little tougher. But most of them, you can actually utilize your calculator and be just fine. Okay, so let me go ahead and pause this thing. 20 minutes.